The wind moved softly across the empty valley, carrying a strange smell of dust and metal. Beneath the thick layers of earth, something ancient was sleeping. It had been there for so long that even the stones above it had forgotten what they once protected. No one alive remembered its story. It was only a faint whisper in old songs and forgotten carvings on broken walls that most people walked past without noticing. Far away, in a small research outpost at the foot of the mountains, a young researcher sat alone in a quiet room. The lights flickered as she studied strange readings on her screen. For months she had been tracking weak signals from underground, soft vibrations that didn't match any known earthquake patterns. Her team thought it was just background noise. But tonight, the lines on her screen danced wildly, forming a rhythm almost like a heartbeat. She leaned closer, her heart racing. "It's happening again," she whispered to herself. The instruments shook slightly. She checked the cables, thinking it might be a technical error, but the pattern grew stronger, steady, pulsing, alive. Outside, the valley was still. The stars above shimmered faintly and the air felt heavy, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. She stepped out, wrapping her jacket tighter against the cold wind. The mountain range in front of her looked dark and endless, but somewhere deep beneath it something was stirring. She had always believed that ancient civilizations had hidden knowledge about the planet, energy sources, maybe even living beings that existed before recorded history. Her friends often laughed at her theories, calling them wild imagination. But she never stopped searching. There were too many unexplained signs, patterns in magnetic fields, strange sounds under the ocean, even stories from old tribes about a sleeping protector buried in the heart of the world. That night, she set up her recording equipment and pointed it toward the largest mountain peak. The ground trembled faintly under her feet. A deep, low hum echoed in the air, so soft that it almost blended with the wind. The sound felt ancient, like something that came from the core of the planet. For a moment, she closed her eyes and listened. It wasn't just noise, it was communication, like a voice trying to reach out through time. Suddenly, a small rock rolled down the slope beside her. Then another. The tremor grew stronger. She rushed back inside the outpost, watching as the monitors flashed bright red. Earthquake warnings filled the screen, but the center of the activity was strange. Too deep to be a natural fault line. It was as if the earth was moving from within, pushing outward. Hours passed, and reports began coming from nearby towns. People had seen flashes of blue light under the ground. Rivers were shifting course and compasses spun in circles. News stations called it a magnetic storm. But the researcher knew it was something more. She sent messages to her colleagues, begging them to look deeper into the readings. But most dismissed it as panic. Only one older scientist replied, saying quietly, "If what you're seeing is real, then something old is waking up." She didn't sleep that night. She replayed the recordings again and again. Every pulse seemed to tell a story, a memory wrapped in energy. When she slowed the sound down, it almost resembled a human heartbeat. She felt both terrified and drawn to it. The more she listened, the more she felt a strange connection, as if that heartbeat was echoing inside her own chest. The next morning, the valley was silent again, but nothing felt normal. Birds avoided the area, and even the air smelled different, heavy, charged. She decided to go closer to the epicenter of the readings, deep into a narrow canyon that led to a cave sealed by fallen rocks. Locals called it the Sleeping Hollow. Few ever went there. They said strange lights were sometimes seen inside the rocks during storms. As she approached, she noticed faint cracks glowing faintly blue under the morning sun. Her breath caught in her throat. She knelt down and touched the rock. It was warm. The glow spread slightly, then faded like the stone itself was breathing. She quickly took out her small recorder and placed it against the wall. The hum returned, deeper and stronger. It sounded almost like words, distant, broken, but filled with emotion. She stepped back, heart pounding. The ground suddenly gave a short, sharp shake and a burst of dust rose around her. Then, as quickly as it came, the tremor stopped. Everything went still again. But in that silence, she felt it, the sense that something behind the rock was aware of her presence. watching, waiting. She hurried back to the outpost and sent all her findings to an international database, marking them as urgent. Within hours, agencies around the world began noticing similar energy pulses. From Africa to South America, deep, under oceans and mountains, the same heartbeat echoed through the planet. News channels started reporting it as a global seismic mystery. Some claimed it was a sign of a coming disaster. Others called it the Earth's cry for help. Meanwhile, deep beneath the mountain, the Guardian stirred. It had no clear memory, only fragments, flashes of bright skies, burning stars, and a time when Earth was young. It remembered protecting something or someone from a great darkness, but the details were lost, hidden under layers of time. Its body, made not of flesh but of living energy, had grown weak after centuries of sleep. Yet the call of the planet had reached it again. The balance was broken, and the world was in danger once more. In the following days, the tremors grew stronger. People across the globe reported seeing strange patterns in the sky, circles of light that vanished as quickly as they appeared. Satellite images showed thin lines of glowing energy running beneath the surface of continents, forming shapes that looked almost like veins. Scientists tried to explain it as magnetic phenomena, but none of the data made sense. The researcher, exhausted but determined, decided to go back to the cave with a small drone camera. As she lowered it into a narrow crack, the signal flickered. For a few seconds, the drone's camera showed something unbelievable. Massive stone-like structures far below the ground, carved with glowing symbols, and at the center, a faint light pulsing rhythmically. Then the connection cut out. Her hands trembled as she replayed the short footage. The light was unlike anything she had seen before. It was alive. It pulsed slowly, then quickly, then slowly again, almost like it was trying to match her own heartbeat. She whispered under her breath, "What are you?" That night, she stayed awake watching the mountains from her window. Clouds gathered, dark and heavy. Thunder rolled, but there was no rain. The air was filled with static energy that made her skin tingle. Around midnight, a brilliant flash lit up the sky. For a brief moment, it looked as if the mountain itself was glowing from within. Then came a deep, low sound. Not thunder, not an explosion, but something deeper. It felt like the earth exhaled. Animals ran from the forests. Power went out in nearby towns. The researcher stood frozen, unable to look away. In the distance, a single beam of golden light shot up from the mountain into the clouds, splitting the darkness. She grabbed her camera, trying to capture it, but the moment it appeared, her equipment shut down completely. For several minutes, the world stood in silence. Then, just as suddenly, everything went back to normal. The wind blew softly again. The stars shone above as if nothing had happened. But deep down, she knew the world had changed. Something old was awake now, and it was watching. Over the next few days, reports poured in from different corners of the planet. Oceans showed sudden drops and rises. Magnetic compasses pointed in random directions, and strange lights appeared in the sky that no telescope could explain. Governments tried to hide the truth, claiming it was atmospheric interference, but people all over the world felt it. An invisible vibration, as if the planet's heart had started beating louder. The researcher stood once more at the mouth of the cave. The faint blue glow was gone now, but the feeling remained. She placed her hand on the cold stone and whispered softly, "If you are truly there, please tell us what you want." For a long moment, there was no answer. Then, so faintly she almost thought she imagined it, the ground beneath her hand pulsed once like a heartbeat returning a reply. She closed her eyes, realizing this was only the beginning. Whatever was beneath the earth had been forgotten by history, but not by the planet itself. It was awakening for a reason. And somewhere far beyond the stars, something dark had already started to move. The valley looked peaceful under the dawn light, but inside the mountains, deep within layers of stone and memory, a pair of unseen eyes opened for the first time in millennia. They glowed faintly, reflecting a world that no longer remembered them. The Guardian had returned to life, and though it did not yet understand why, It knew one truth. It had woken because the Earth was calling for help. The next few days felt like the world had quietly stepped into something it couldn't understand. Everything looked normal on the surface. People went to work, children played, and news anchors smiled on screen. But underneath that calm, the planet was changing. Magnetic fields were shifting in ways that no scientist could explain. Weather patterns began to act strangely. Sudden storms appeared in dry regions, and the sea level rose and fell without reason. It was as if the world had developed a pulse that no one could see but everyone could feel. At the research outpost near the mountains, the young researcher hadn't slept properly since that night of the golden light. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard that low hum again, the same deep sound that came from the earth. It wasn't frightening anymore. It almost felt familiar, like an echo of something ancient trying to speak. She had shared her recordings online and with international observatories, but most people dismissed them as interference or a hoax. Only a small team of independent scientists reached out to her privately, saying they had picked up similar signals from the ocean floor and deep caves in other parts of the world. The signals all followed the same strange pattern, a slow, rhythmic beat like a giant sleeping heart waking up. Meanwhile, far beneath the mountains, the Guardian was stirring. It did not remember its name or its purpose clearly, but it could feel the pull of the planet above. It was weak, its energy scattered, and its once radiant form now cracked with the weight of centuries. Still, it felt the earth calling out in pain. Something was wrong. Something unnatural was spreading through the world it once swore to protect. The Guardian's eyes opened for the first time in thousands of years. Its vision was filled with light and fragments of memory. It remembered the stars, the sound of wind, and the feeling of warmth that came from the planet's heart. But along with those memories came confusion and loneliness. The world had changed. The people it once knew were gone, and what remained was a civilization that had forgotten the language of the earth. As it moved, the rocks above shifted slightly, creating deep vibrations that echoed through the valley. Seismographs across nearby regions picked up the movement instantly. The readings were so unusual that the data centers thought it was an equipment malfunction. The tremors came not from fault lines but from a single concentrated source that seemed alive. The researcher was the first to notice it. She stared at the graphs on her computer screen and whispered, "It's moving." Her heart raced as she realized the pattern was not random, it was directional. Whatever was under the ground was no longer dormant. It was rising. That evening she drove toward the mountain again, carrying her recording equipment and a small drone. The roads were empty except for a few military vehicles heading the opposite way. News had spread that the region was being closed for geological safety reasons, but she knew that was just a cover-up. Governments were aware of the anomaly now, but they didn't understand it either. They thought it was some kind of hidden weapon, an experiment gone wrong, or maybe even a threat. When she reached the foot of the mountain, the air felt different, warmer, charged with static energy that made her skin prickle. The ground vibrated softly beneath her boots like a sleeping creature breathing just below the surface. She sent the drone up, watching its feed on her tablet. As it hovered over the cracked valley, she saw faint blue light spreading through the rocks like veins, connecting in patterns that looked almost like constellations. The drone suddenly lost control and crashed, its camera freezing on one last frame. A brief flash of something massive moving beneath the rock, like a shadow trying to break free. Then the earth roared. A deep rumbling sound shook the mountains. Birds flew wildly into the sky, and dust clouds rolled down the slopes. The researcher fell to her knees, holding her camera tightly. The cracks widened, glowing brighter with every passing second. She heard a low, distant sound, not mechanical, not human, but alive. It was a voice, faint and filled with sorrow, echoing from deep within the ground. Though she couldn't understand the words, she felt the emotion behind them. It wasn't anger. It was pain. Across the world, strange things began happening. In the deserts, compasses spun endlessly. In the polar regions, scientists reported seeing faint waves of light beneath the ice. Satellites captured unusual flashes in the atmosphere, rings of energy that appeared and vanished in seconds. Governments tried to hide the footage, but people online started sharing what they saw. They called it the Earth Pulse. News reporters stood in front of shaking cameras talking about earthquakes, radiation bursts, or failed experiments. No one had a clear explanation, but everyone felt that something bigger was happening, something beyond human control. Meanwhile, In a large underground command center thousands of miles away, a group of scientists and officials watched the readings on giant screens. The energy signature was not like anything they had recorded before. One of the older scientists spoke quietly. "It's not from outside the planet. It's coming from within." Another man replied nervously, "If that's true, then whatever it is, it's been here all along." The Guardian finally broke free from its stone prison. The cave walls shattered and waves of energy rippled outward, shaking the entire mountain range. Its body, once made of radiant light, was now dim and covered in dust, its movements slow and heavy. It looked around, seeing the new world for the first time. A world full of noise, pollution, and confusion. It didn't understand the machines or the metal birds flying in the sky. It only knew that the earth felt weaker than before. It began walking, each step leaving behind faint glowing marks on the ground. With every movement, plants seemed to rise and bloom for a brief second before fading again. The Guardian reached the surface as the night sky opened above. The stars shone brightly, but something about them felt strange. It could sense darkness far beyond them, moving slowly toward Earth like a shadow spreading across the universe. The researcher, hiding behind a large rock nearby, watched in disbelief. Her camera trembled in her hands. What she saw didn't look like any creature or machine she had ever imagined. It was tall, glowing softly with golden light beneath layers of earth and stone. Its eyes burned gently, not in anger but in sadness. She didn't move, didn't speak. She was afraid that if she made a sound, the vision would disappear like a dream. The Guardian turned slowly, sensing her presence. It didn't see her as a threat. It simply looked at her as if trying to remember something. For a few seconds, they just stared at each other, the last memory of the old world meeting the first witness of the new one. Then the Guardian looked toward the horizon, where distant cities glowed with human light. It could feel the pulse of the world growing weaker, and it knew the darkness beyond the stars was watching too. Suddenly, military helicopters appeared in the sky, their searchlights sweeping across the mountain. The Guardian lifted its head, startled. The lights hit its body, and the soldiers began shouting through loudspeakers. They had no idea what they were facing. The creature's presence made their instruments go wild. Compasses broke, radios failed, and their engines began to stutter mid-air. One of the pilots screamed over the radio, "It's interfering with everything." The Guardian raised one hand slowly, not in attack but in confusion. The machines frightened it. It didn't remember such things existing before. Its body glowed brighter as it tried to communicate, releasing waves of energy that disrupted the sky. The helicopters swerved out of control, one barely avoiding a crash. The soldiers thought it was attacking and opened fire, but their weapons jammed instantly as if the air itself rejected violence. The researcher ran forward, waving her hands and shouting for them to stop. "It's not dangerous," she cried, though no one could hear her over the chaos. But before she could reach closer, the ground shook again, and the Guardian turned away, walking slowly toward the forest. Within moments, it vanished into the shadows of the trees, leaving behind only glowing footprints that faded as quickly as they appeared. By morning, the entire area was sealed off. Scientists, soldiers, and investigators filled the valley, trying to explain what had happened. They found traces of unknown energy, melted metal from the crashed drone, and the strange circular patterns burned into the soil. No one had a clear answer. The official report called it a geological energy surge, but the researcher knew better. She sat on the edge of the valley, looking at the mountains now covered in mist. The air felt empty without the hum that once filled it. She whispered softly, "You're not our enemy. You're trying to help us, aren't you?" She didn't know if the Guardian could hear her, but deep in the forest, where sunlight barely touched the ground, it stopped for a moment. The wind moved gently around it, carrying her voice. It looked up at the sky, where stars still glowed faintly, and a strange heaviness filled its chest. It could feel the darkness beyond the stars beginning to stir, moving closer with every passing night. For the first time since it woke, the Guardian felt something it had never known before. Fear, and far above the earth, hidden beyond the starlight, the darkness began to whisper back. The world didn't know it yet, but something had changed in the sky. The stars that had always seemed so steady began to flicker faintly, almost unnoticeably at first. Astronomers thought it was interference or dust, but soon the flicker grew stronger, like a heartbeat echoing across the heavens. At the same time, strange signals started appearing in space observatories, patterns that didn't match any natural radio waves. They came from deep space far beyond the solar system, repeating the same simple rhythm. 4 slow pulses, 1 long one, then silence. People were too busy to care at first. Life continued. News cycles moved quickly, talking about weather changes, political tensions, and new technology. But quietly, nature was changing in ways no one could ignore. Whales changed their migration paths, birds flew in circles before disappearing, and plants began growing faster but dying sooner. Scientists couldn't explain it. The world felt alive but restless, like it was preparing for something. In the mountains, the researcher still searched for the glowing figure she had seen that night. She couldn't forget those eyes filled with sadness and light. Every night she replayed the recordings she took, trying to understand what she had witnessed. Her equipment kept picking up faint vibrations, similar to the heartbeat signal but slower now, weaker, as if the being had gone into hiding. She began to notice something else. The pulse from underground had a strange connection to the new signals from space. When one grew stronger, the other weakened, like 2 forces pulling against each other. It was as if the planet and the stars were part of the same story, an old one hidden from human memory. She started studying ancient texts and carvings, looking for any clue. In one old scroll from a forgotten civilization, she found drawings of a tall figure surrounded by swirling lines and symbols that looked like stars. Beneath the drawings there were simple words, translated roughly. When the stars turn dark, the guardian shall wake, for the darkness will follow. She sat back, her heart pounding. The guardian, could that be what she had seen? Meanwhile, deep in the forest, the guardian sat silently near a river, watching its reflection in the water. Its light had dimmed to a soft blue glow. It felt weak, its energy fading faster each day. It could sense the fear spreading across the planet, not just from people but from the earth itself. The animals, the oceans, even the wind felt uneasy. The guardian closed its eyes and tried to reach the planet's core with its thoughts. In the silence of its mind, faint voices echoed, memories buried deep within time. It saw flashes of a long-forgotten war. Stars falling from the sky, dark shapes moving through the void, swallowing light wherever they passed. The guardian remembered standing at the edge of Earth's atmosphere, shielding it from something vast and cold. It remembered using all its strength to seal the darkness away. And then, nothing. Only sleep. Now that same darkness was returning. Far above Earth, satellites began to fail. Their cameras went black as something blocked the light from distant stars. Astronomers called it the cosmic veil. They said it might be dust clouds or energy fields, but the truth was much stranger. The stars were literally vanishing, one by one. Some people thought it was a trick of the eyes, but every night the constellations looked thinner. The familiar sky was fading. In secret meetings, world leaders grew anxious. Technology was failing. Communication signals were being disrupted, and strange electromagnetic storms were spreading across continents. In some places, lights flickered for hours even without power. People began to talk about prophecies, about the Earth waking up. The researcher tried to warn them. She sent her data to anyone who would listen, showing how the underground energy and the cosmic pulses were connected. But no one wanted to believe that something beyond science could be happening. "You can't scare the world with fairy tales," one official told her over a call. She quietly replied, "It's not a fairy tale. It's a warning." That night she climbed back to the cave where it all began. The sky above was strange. Stars flickering, clouds moving in slow spirals like they were being pulled by invisible threads. She sat near the entrance holding her small recorder, whispering softly as if talking to someone who might be listening. "If you can hear me, please tell me what's coming." The air grew colder. The wind stopped. Then faintly she felt the ground tremble beneath her. A soft light appeared from inside the cave. She took a step back, shielding her eyes. The light pulsed 3 times, then faded, leaving behind silence. She whispered again, "Is that you?" But there was no answer. Only a deep sense of sadness that filled the air, as if the earth itself had sighed. Far away in space, something enormous moved behind the dying stars. Telescopes caught only fragments of it, a shadow stretching across galaxies. Scientists called it a dark cloud of unknown origin, but in truth it was not a cloud. It was alive. It moved with purpose, swallowing starlight as it came closer. and at its core something like eyes glowed faintly, watching Earth. The Guardian felt it before anyone saw it. Its body trembled as waves of cold energy passed through the planet. The memories grew clearer now. Those eyes, that endless blackness, it was the same enemy it once sealed away. The Shadowborn, beings that fed on light and life, drifting through the universe, consuming stars to sustain themselves. They had been locked beyond the stars long ago, but the seal was weakening. The Guardian had woken because the darkness had already begun to break through. The next morning, the researchers' phone buzzed with urgent alerts. Observatories were reporting massive energy spikes in the sky. The sun's light was flickering slightly, something that had never happened before. The magnetic field around Earth had started to twist unnaturally. She read the reports with wide eyes. "It's starting," she whispered. All around the world, people began to feel it too. Nights grew longer. The moonlight dimmed. In some regions, entire days passed without sunlight. The temperature dropped suddenly, confusing weather systems everywhere. Still, no one could explain what was happening. The Guardian walked through the forest, feeling weaker with every step. It knew the seal was breaking faster than it could recover its strength. It reached an open field and looked at the sky. Where once the stars had comforted it, now there was only darkness. It raised its hands, summoning what little power it still had, trying to call out to the heavens. But the energy it released only flickered weakly before fading. The Guardian fell to its knees. The darkness had grown too strong. The researcher miles away saw a sudden light on her monitor, a sharp burst of energy from the same location where she first saw the Guardian. Without hesitation, she packed her gear and set out toward the forest. The road was rough, and strange electrical interference made her vehicle's lights flicker. By the time she reached the forest, everything was quiet again. No birds, no wind, only silence. She walked carefully, flashlight trembling in her hand. And then she saw it, the faint golden glow through the trees. The Guardian stood there, weak and trembling, looking up at the dark sky. She felt tears in her eyes as she approached slowly. "You're dying," she whispered. "Please tell me how to help." The Guardian turned its head slightly, its glowing eyes dim but kind. It raised its hand weakly, touching the ground. In that moment, she understood. Its power came from the Earth itself. But the Earth was weakening because of what was happening beyond the stars. The balance between light and darkness was breaking. A deep rumble echoed through the forest. The stars vanished completely for a few seconds, and the world was covered in pitch darkness. The Guardian looked up again, its voice low and ancient, echoing not in sound but inside her mind. "They are coming." She stepped back, her heart pounding. "Who's coming?" she asked out loud, but there was no answer. The Guardian's body flickered, its light fading even more. She fell to her knees, watching helplessly as the being slowly turned away, walking deeper into the forest until its glow disappeared behind the trees. That night, from every corner of the planet, people looked up and saw the same thing, the stars forming strange lines across the sky like cracks spreading through glass. For a few seconds, the lines glowed faintly red, then vanished. But those who saw it would never forget. They felt something cold touch their hearts, something that whispered softly, "The light is ending." The researcher drove back to her outpost, shaken but determined. She sat at her desk, staring at the data on her screens. The signals from space were growing stronger, closer. She didn't know what the darkness was or how to stop it. But she knew one thing for certain. The Guardian was real, and it was Earth's only defense. She wrote in her notes, "If the stars are dying, it means the old battle has begun again. The Guardian is awake, but it's weak. The question is, will we believe before it's too late?" Outside, a quiet wind moved through the valley. The ground gave a faint, rhythmic pulse, steady like a heartbeat. Somewhere deep in the darkness, the Guardian lifted its head, feeling the same rhythm. And far beyond the fading stars, the Shadowborn stirred, ready to descend. The war of light and darkness was about to begin once more. The night skies had never looked this strange before. Across the world, people stood outside their homes staring upward, whispering in confusion and fear. The stars were fading again, but this time they didn't return. One by one, the brightest lights in the sky dimmed, leaving only a few scattered points of weak light. Astronomers everywhere worked non-stop trying to explain the phenomenon. Some said it was cosmic dust. Others said it was a new type of space storm. But deep inside, many felt what science couldn't explain. Something unnatural was happening. In cities, power grids flickered on and off without reason. Communication lines broke down. Airplanes were grounded because their instruments had stopped responding correctly. Nature was acting strangely too. Animals left their natural habitats, moving toward the poles as if escaping something unseen. Whales changed direction mid-ocean, heading toward deep waters. Flocks of birds flew at night without resting, their movements restless and confused. It was as if the whole planet was warning its children to prepare. In the quiet mountain region where the Guardian had first awakened, the researcher sat inside her small lab, watching screens filled with data she could barely process. The heartbeat signal from the Earth had grown faster, strong but unstable. And the signal from the stars, the one she once thought was a random pattern, was now repeating clearly. It was a call or perhaps a countdown. She tried to match both signals together and realized something that sent chills down her spine. Every time the sky signal pulsed, the Earth's heartbeat weakened. It was like one force was feeding off the other. Outside, the air was heavy. The wind carried a strange low sound, almost like a faraway cry. She stepped out, looking toward the forest where she had last seen the Guardian. The trees swayed even though there was no storm. She whispered softly, "You're still there, aren't you?" But only silence answered. She didn't know that miles away, deep within those woods, the Guardian was kneeling by a dying river. Its light had faded almost completely. It could feel the planet's pain as if it were its own. The water had lost its life. The earth beneath was cracking. It touched the ground gently, and for a moment the soil glowed faintly, life returning for a heartbeat before fading again. The Guardian looked up at the sky, sensing the approaching darkness. It was closer now. It could feel their presence beyond the clouds. The Shadowborn had begun their descent. Thousands of miles above, invisible to human eyes, faint ripples in space opened like thin cracks. From within them, shadows leaked out, soft at first, like smoke spreading through the cosmos. These weren't creatures in the way humans understood life. They had no solid form, no heartbeat, no light. They were made of absence, feeding on energy, devouring stars to grow. They drifted silently toward Earth, drawn by the Guardian's awakening, the last light they had failed to destroy ages ago. Back on Earth, scientists monitoring satellites noticed strange static disturbances. The screens flickered with random black lines and flashes that formed unfamiliar patterns. One of them whispered nervously, "It's not interference. It's something blocking the signal." The next moment, all satellite connections went dark. Every screen in the world turned blank for a few seconds. When the images came back, what they saw made their hearts freeze. A faint shape, enormous and black, stretching across the upper atmosphere for just a moment before vanishing again. No one could explain it. Governments went silent and fear spread quickly. People started praying, lighting candles or gathering in groups hoping for comfort. But no comfort came. That same night, the researcher decided she couldn't just watch from her lab anymore. She packed her bag, grabbed her equipment, and began her journey toward the place where she had last seen the Guardian. The roads were empty. Every radio station she tried to tune into was filled with static. It felt like the world was holding its breath. When she reached the forest, the silence was strange. Even the insects were quiet. The air felt thicker, heavier. The sky above her shimmered faintly, as if something unseen was moving between the clouds. She followed the faint hum that had always guided her before. It led her deeper, where trees grew twisted, their leaves glowing faintly blue from the energy that the Guardian had once released. She found it there, lying near the riverbank, its body dim, barely moving. It looked weaker than before, its light flickering like a dying flame. She ran closer, falling to her knees beside it. "You can't give up," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Please don't fade away. We need you." The Guardian turned its head slowly. Its eyes, though faint, still held warmth. For a moment, she felt the same calm she had felt the first time she saw it, that quiet sadness mixed with kindness. The air vibrated gently, and though it didn't speak in words, she heard its message inside her mind. "They have crossed the edge of the stars. The light is falling." Her eyes filled with tears. "Then we have to stop them," she said. "There must be something we can do." The Guardian tried to stand but stumbled, its energy too weak. Its hands touched the earth, and faint circles of light spread outward before fading. It was trying to connect with the planet, but the link was broken. The darkness spreading from space was draining the Earth's life force faster than the Guardian could restore it. Suddenly, a bright flash lit the sky. Both looked up. It wasn't lightning. It was something entering the atmosphere. A dark object tore through the clouds, leaving behind a trail of black smoke that glowed faintly red at its edges. The sound came seconds later, deep and metallic, echoing through the valleys. The Guardian's eyes widened. It knew what it was. One of the Shadowborn had arrived. Far across the world, people saw the same thing. Strange black streaks appeared across the skies, moving like living comets. Some fell into oceans, some vanished in deserts, others landed in remote forests. No explosions, no fire, just silence after impact. The world's instruments failed to track them. Every radar and telescope went blind. The air filled with a faint hum that no one could locate. The Guardian turned back to the researcher, its body trembling. "The veil has broken," its voice echoed softly inside her mind. "The war has begun again." Moments later, a sudden gust of cold wind swept through the forest. The trees bent, their leaves falling as if the air itself had lost warmth. The Guardian stood tall, gathering what little power it had left. Its light brightened for a few seconds, forming a shield of energy around them. From the darkness ahead, faint shapes began to form, twisting shadows that looked alive, moving slowly closer. They didn't have faces, but their presence was suffocating, like standing too close to a void. The Guardian stepped forward, its glow flickering with every movement. The ground trembled slightly as it raised its arm. The shadows hesitated but did not retreat. Instead, they multiplied, spreading through the forest like black smoke. The Guardian sent out a wave of energy that lit up the trees, and for a moment, the darkness disappeared. But when the light faded, the shadows returned stronger. The researcher could barely stand, the air so cold it burned her lungs. She wanted to help but didn't know how. The Guardian turned toward her, its light dimming again. She heard its voice faintly. "You must tell them. The darkness feeds on fear. If they lose hope, it wins." Then the light around the Guardian burst outward in one final surge, blinding and beautiful. The shadows dissolved into mist and vanished into the sky. The forest went still again. The Guardian fell to the ground, its body faintly glowing. The researcher ran to it, holding its hand tightly. "You saved us," she whispered. "But they'll come again, won't they?" The faint voice echoed in her mind once more. They never stopped coming. They only waited for the stars to fall. By the next morning, strange clouds covered much of the planet. Daylight grew dim even when the sun was above the horizon. The air had a metallic taste, and compasses stopped working entirely. Scientists finally admitted they didn't understand what was happening. Fear spread faster than truth. People began to panic, stocking supplies, leaving cities, and trying to make sense of a world that suddenly felt too fragile. The researcher returned to her lab and sent one final report to the world's observatories. She wrote that the phenomenon wasn't natural. It was alive, it was spreading, and it was feeding on fear and chaos. She ended her message with a simple line. "There is something ancient among us. It is trying to protect us, but it cannot do it alone." She sat quietly afterward, looking out the window at the dim sky. Somewhere beyond the clouds, the Guardian rested, recovering what strength it could. The world didn't know about it yet. Most people still believed these were just storms or space events. But deep down, she knew that sooner or later everyone would see the truth. The darkness wasn't coming anymore. It was already here. And far beyond the fading horizon, the stars continued to disappear one after another, as if someone was blowing out the lights of the universe. The last light of Earth flickered weakly in the vast ocean of night, waiting for the moment when all hope would be tested. The Guardian's final thought echoed softly through the wind. "The light of the world is not in the stars above. It is in the hearts below. If they remember that, we still have a chance." The world had grown quieter. Not peaceful, just strangely silent, as if the air itself was holding its breath. The sun still rose, but its light was weaker now, pale and uncertain. Every day felt colder than the one before. Across continents, people tried to live normally, pretending everything was fine. But deep down, everyone could feel that something was wrong. The world they knew was slipping away, piece by piece. The researcher sat alone in her cabin near the mountains, surrounded by maps, charts, and old scrolls she had collected from hidden temples and forgotten archives. Her eyes were tired, but she kept reading. She had spent weeks searching for clues, anything that could explain who the Guardian really was and why it had been sealed away. The more she read, the more she realized that the stories told across different cultures weren't myths at all. They were memories. Every civilization had once known about the Guardian, though they called it by different names. Some called it the Stone Soul, others the last light, and a few described it as the heart of the world. All the stories had one thing in common. They spoke of a betrayal. A time when humans, blinded by fear, had turned against their protector. The old writings said the Guardian was not created by gods but by the earth itself, born from its energy, shaped to protect balance between life and death, light and shadow. But when darkness from beyond the stars first came, humans misunderstood its actions. They thought it was bringing the destruction instead of stopping it. Out of fear, they sealed it beneath the earth, believing they were saving themselves. They didn't realize they were silencing their only shield. The researcher stopped reading and looked outside her window. Snow had begun to fall, even though it wasn't supposed to be winter. The clouds above were thick and dark, and a faint red glow pulsed behind them. The same glow that had been seen the night the shadows fell from the sky. She wrapped her coat tighter and stepped outside. The world was colder, but she could feel something else beneath the surface, a heartbeat faint but real. The Guardian was still alive. She followed the familiar path through the forest to where she had last seen it. The river was frozen now, the water still as glass. Near the edge, a faint light shimmered beneath a layer of ice. She knelt and placed her hand on it. "You're still here," she whispered. "I know you can hear me." The ice cracked softly, and a thin beam of blue light rose from below. The ground trembled slightly. Then slowly the Guardian emerged, rising from the earth as if waking from a long sleep. Its body glowed weakly, like the last spark of a dying fire. It looked at her, and even though it didn't speak aloud, she felt its words inside her mind. Soft, tired, and heavy with sadness. "The world has changed too much. I can feel its pain." She nodded, her voice shaking. "You've been asleep for so long. The people forgot you. They didn't understand what you were trying to do." The Guardian closed its eyes, memories flashing within its fading light. The ground beneath them began to show faint images, shadows of the past replaying like a silent story. She saw tall towers made of stone and light, people kneeling before the Guardian as it stood between them and the dark skies. She saw the moment when humans turned against it, their faces filled with fear, their hands holding weapons of light. The Guardian didn't fight back. It simply stood there as they sealed it beneath the earth, whispering only one thing before vanishing. "When the stars grow cold, I will return." The images faded, leaving only silence. The researcher wiped her tears. "They betrayed you, and yet you still want to protect them." The Guardian's eyes glowed faintly. "They are part of this world. I was born to protect all life, not only those who remember me." It turned its gaze to the horizon, where a dark shimmer was spreading across the sky. The Shadowborn had multiplied, covering the upper atmosphere like a moving storm. The Guardian could feel their hunger growing. Every moment it stayed weak, more of the Earth's energy was being drained away. The balance was breaking. If it didn't restore its full strength soon, everything would collapse, the oceans, the forests, even the air itself. The researcher stepped forward. "You need to recover your power. Tell me how. I'll help." For a long moment, the Guardian didn't answer. Then faint lines of light appeared around its body, forming circles that hovered in the air. "My strength came from the heart pulse," it said. "It lies deep within the earth. When humans turned against me, they built walls around it, cutting me off. The pulse is fading now. To restore it, I must return to where I was created." She understood what it meant. The ancient sites she had studied, those strange stone structures buried beneath deserts, jungles, and mountains, were all connected to this pulse. They were like veins of the planet, carrying energy from one point to another. "If we reactivate those places," she said, "you'll regain your full power, won't you?" The Guardian looked at her with something like hope. "Yes, but I cannot reach them alone. My energy is bound to this land. You must guide others to awaken the rest." She nodded firmly. "Then we'll do it. I'll gather the people who still believe." Over the next few days, she worked tirelessly. She contacted scientists, explorers, and historians she trusted. Some ignored her messages. Some laughed. But a few listened. She sent them the coordinates of the old sites and explained everything she had discovered, though it sounded impossible. Those who had witnessed the strange lights in the sky and the dying of stars couldn't deny that something real was happening. Slowly, small teams began moving toward those forgotten places, carrying equipment designed to read energy waves. As the teams worked, the Guardian stayed near the mountains, trying to stabilize the Earth's energy flow. Its body grew slightly brighter each day, but not enough. The darkness above was spreading faster. One night, while the researcher was watching the energy readings, she noticed a sudden spike. The heart pulse had responded from one of the sites, a temple buried under the sands of an old desert. A message came through her radio, filled with excitement. "It's working," a voice said. "There's a vibration under the ground. Something is waking up." The Guardian opened its eyes, its light flickering with new strength. For the first time in centuries, it could feel the planet's rhythm again. But just as hope began to rise, the tremors started. The earth shook violently and the sky outside turned almost black. The Guardian looked up sharply. "They are trying to stop us." Lightning streaked across the sky. Not natural lightning, but red and crooked, tearing through clouds. The temperature dropped sharply. Far above, the Shadowborn began moving closer. Their shapes were faint, but their presence filled the air with dread. The Guardian stood tall, light surging through its body. It raised its arms, sending a wave of blue energy upward, forming a shield around the mountains. The shock wave spread for miles, protecting everything beneath it. The researcher watched in awe as the sky above turned into a storm of darkness and light clashing against each other. She could hear the faint whisper of the Guardian's voice inside her head. "If I fall before the pulse is restored, the earth will die. You must finish what I began." Her eyes filled with tears. "No," she said aloud. "You can't fall again. You've already given enough." But the Guardian didn't respond. It stepped forward, its light flaring bright as it pushed the shadows back. Meanwhile, across the world, the teams at the ancient sites continued their work, unaware of how close the battle had come. In jungles, deserts, and icy plains, circles of blue light began to appear on the ground. The energy flowed from one site to another like veins carrying life through a body. The Guardian's power grew with each connection. Its form became clearer, its voice stronger. But every burst of light also drew more shadows toward Earth. At last, the final site responded, the heart pulse deep beneath the ocean floor. The planet trembled with a low hum that could be felt everywhere. Oceans rippled, mountains vibrated, and clouds broke apart. The Guardian fell to its knees, overwhelmed by the returning energy. Its light brightened until the whole valley glowed like dawn. The researcher shielded her eyes, barely able to stand from the force of it. When the light finally calmed, the Guardian looked renewed. It wasn't weak anymore. Its voice was firm and warm. "The pulse is alive again, but the darkness has felt it too. They will strike with everything they have." The ground beneath them rumbled again, but this time it wasn't from weakness. It was the sound of the earth itself awakening. The forest began to breathe, rivers started to flow again, and snow melted into life. The Guardian stood at the center, glowing brighter than ever. The researcher looked up, her heart filled with both fear and hope. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. The Guardian looked toward the horizon where the sky was already darkening again. "Now," it said softly, "we face the end." It began to walk toward the open field, the air around it shimmering with heat and light. For the first time, the world would soon witness its protector with their own eyes. The final battle was coming, not between nations or armies, but between light and shadow, between hope and despair. And as the first stars disappeared behind the curtain of black once more, the Guardian whispered into the wind, "Let them remember the truth this time." The morning sky no longer looked like a sky. It was dark even though the sun should have been rising. The light that once gave warmth to the world was faint, hidden behind thick shifting clouds that pulsed like a living shadow. The stars were gone. The moon had vanished. The only glow left came from the mountains where the Guardian stood, shining softly like the last candle in a storm. The air felt heavy, thick with something that wasn't just cold. It was emptiness. People across the planet looked upward with fear in their eyes. There were no more doubts now. They had seen the truth. The skies weren't sick. The darkness wasn't a storm. It was alive. And it was coming for them. In every corner of the world, people gathered together, some in temples, some in homes, some on rooftops holding hands, whispering prayers hoping that whatever was happening would pass. Others watched the screens where scientists spoke with shaking voices, admitting they didn't understand. They showed images from satellites before they had gone dark, massive black structures moving in patterns too deliberate to be natural. The Shadowborn were closing in. In her mountain cabin, the researcher watched the sky turn from gray to deep red. Her instruments had all stopped working. The readings made no sense anymore. Energy levels were off the scale. She knew what that meant. It was starting. The final descent. She grabbed her coat and ran outside toward the valley where the Guardian had last stood. Snow crunched under her boots, the air sharp and thin. But she didn't stop. Her heart raced, driven by a single thought. The Guardian needs me. When she reached the clearing, the sight before her made her stop in her tracks. The Guardian stood tall at the center of a vast circle of light spreading across the earth. Its body glowed brighter than ever, surrounded by pillars of pure energy rising from the ground. The mountains trembled, not from fear but from awakening. Streams of blue light ran across the valleys like veins glowing beneath the planet's surface. The earth itself seemed alive again, fighting back. The Guardian turned its head slightly as if sensing her presence. Its voice echoed softly inside her mind. "You came," she nodded, breathing heavily. "I said I would." "The people, they finally believe. They're scared, but they believe." The Guardian's light flickered gently, almost like a smile. "Belief is the first spark. The world remembers what it once forgot." Before she could speak again, the ground shook violently. The sky above them opened, not with light but with darkness. The clouds tore apart, revealing enormous swirling shadows moving like waves. The Shadowborn had arrived. The air filled with a deep humming sound that made the ground tremble and the air vibrate. They descended in silence, vast shapes blotting out what little light remained. The Guardian raised its arms slowly. The lines of light beneath the earth brightened, forming a massive symbol that stretched for miles, a mark older than any human language. "This is the pulse of life," it said, "the world's final breath." The researcher stepped back, shielding her eyes as beams of blue and gold light burst upward from the ground, striking the sky. The darkness recoiled, hissing like steam hitting cold water. For a moment, hope filled the air. But the Shadowborn were relentless. They pushed downward, pressing against the light, consuming it. The Guardian's glow flickered under the weight of their power. She shouted, "You can't hold them off alone." The Guardian's voice echoed inside her again, calm even as the earth cracked beneath its feet. "I was never meant to do it alone. The earth's light lies within its people. They must rise. Their hearts must shine." Tears blurred her vision. "How? Tell me how they can help." "Hope," the voice said simply. "Hope is light. When they believe, the darkness weakens. Tell them to remember the light within." She fell to her knees, pulling out her small transmitter. The signal barely worked, but she tried anyway. Her voice trembled as she spoke into it. "To anyone who can hear me, this isn't a storm. It's not the end of the world. It's a test. The earth is alive and it's fighting. We have to fight too, not with weapons but with faith. Don't lose hope. Don't let the darkness take your hearts." Her message reached radios and devices all over the world. People in cities, villages, and shelters heard her voice. And something began to change. In homes and streets, people lit candles, lanterns, flashlights, anything that gave off light. Children held their parents' hands, whispering that the Guardian was protecting them. For the first time in weeks, laughter mixed with tears. The darkness still loomed, but it no longer felt endless. Up on the mountain, the Guardian felt it too. A wave of warmth spread through the air. Its fading light began to strengthen again. "They remember," it whispered. The Shadowborn screamed, their voices like thunder. They dove toward the ground, crashing into the Guardian's barrier. The impact sent shockwaves through the valley. The mountains cracked. Trees fell. Rivers froze in mid-motion. But the Guardian stood tall, pushing back with every ounce of energy it had left. The researcher held onto a rock, shouting over the roaring wind. "You can do it. They believe in you." The Guardian's light flared brighter than ever before. The symbol on the ground glowed gold now, mixing with the blue of the Earth's energy. The air shimmered. The light reached higher, piercing through the layers of shadow above. But the darkness was vast. The Guardian began to falter again, its body trembling under the strain. Cracks appeared along its glowing skin, spilling streams of energy into the ground. The researcher cried out, "No! You can't fall. Not again!" The Guardian looked at her, its eyes gentle despite the chaos. "I was made to protect, not to live forever. My purpose is not to survive, it's to keep the world alive." Its voice echoed across the planet, though no one could hear it with their ears. Every creature, every person felt it inside their hearts. A quiet, comforting presence whispering, "You are not alone." Then, with one final breath, The Guardian raised both hands toward the heavens. The light from its body spread outward, connecting with every beam of light the people had created. Candles, fires, lamps, city lights, all of it joined together, forming a network of glowing threads across the planet. The earth shone like a star once more. The Shadowborn screamed louder, twisting in pain as the light pierced through them. They tried to flee, but the Guardian's energy followed, sealing the rifts in the sky one by one. The red clouds turned white, then gold. The sound of thunder faded. The trembling stopped. When the brightness finally faded, the world was silent again. The sky cleared, revealing stars that had long disappeared. The moon returned, glowing peacefully. The air was calm. The wind was warm, but the Guardian was gone. The researcher stood in the empty clearing, tears running down her face. The ground where the Guardian had stood was cracked open, glowing faintly blue. She stepped closer and placed her hand on the earth. It was warm. She closed her eyes and whispered, "You did it. You kept your promise." For a moment, she thought she heard a faint echo in the wind, the same calm voice that had guided her all this time. "The light was never mine. It was always yours." She smiled through her tears. Around her, the forest began to heal. The river that had been frozen started to flow again, reflecting the stars above. The mountains no longer trembled. Life returned. In the days that followed, people across the world woke up to blue skies and sunlight that felt different, stronger, softer, more alive. Scientists couldn't explain what had happened. Governments called it a global phenomenon. But in quiet places, people whispered the truth. They spoke of the Guardian of Earth, the protector who had returned when humanity needed it most. The researcher continued her work, not as a scientist this time, but as a storyteller. She traveled to schools, villages, and cities, telling everyone about the Guardian, not as a myth, but as a reminder. "The Guardian isn't gone," she would say gently. "It became part of the world again. Every time you show kindness, every time you protect something fragile, that's the Guardian living through you." Years passed, but she never forgot that night. The glow in the sky, the sound of the earth breathing again, the warmth of hope that spread through humanity like fire in the cold. Sometimes when the wind was quiet and the stars shimmered brighter than usual, she would close her eyes and whisper softly, "Thank you." And somewhere deep beneath the earth, hidden beyond reach, the faintest pulse still echoed, a steady, quiet rhythm, the world's heartbeat, because the Guardian had never truly left. It had simply become one with the planet it loved, and as long as people remembered the light within themselves, the stars above would never truly fade again.